The statement of Randolph Carter. The oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest of fear is fear of the unknown. H.P. Lovecraft. It was a cold, muggy night in the month of October. My crewmates and I were soaked and tired. Our last case was easily the strangest we ever had conducted. Harley Warren, a man in his early 30s, had gone missing in the cypress swamp. His body was never found, and the only evidence we had was a witness, Randolph Carter. The man was a graduate student and Warren's apprentice. What was more unnerving was the boy's ravings. He swears that something unimaginable was what took Warren's life. However, in the court of law, all this granted him was a first-degree murder charge. He wasn't the first lunatic we've interrogated, far from it. Though, even the looniest of maniacs slip up eventually. But Randolph wasn't one of them. Had his story not sounded so far-fetched, we might have believed the man. Something wasn't right here. Alright, let's play that last tape and call it a night.
It is true that I have for 5 years been his closest friend, and a partial sharer of his terrible research into the unknown. I will not deny, though my memory is uncertain and indistinct, that this witness of yours may have seen us together, as he says, on the Gainesville Pike, walking toward Big Cypress Swamp at 11:30 on that awful night. That we bore electric lanterns, spades, and a curious coil of wire with attached instruments, I will even affirm. For these things all played a part in the single, hideous scene which remains burned into my shaken recollection. But of what followed, and of the reason I was found alone and dazed on the edge of the swamp next morning, I must insist that I know nothing save what I have told you over and over again. You say to me that there is nothing in the swamp or near it which could form the setting of that frightful episode. I reply that I know nothing beyond what I saw. Vision or nightmare it may have been. Vision or nightmare, I fervently hope it was. Yet it is all my mind retains of what took place in those shocking hours after we left the sight of men. And why Harley Warren did not return, he or his shade, or some nameless thing I cannot describe, alone can tell.
Well done. You can now continue the game by clicking the End Listening button at the bottom screen. You can also try listening again if you missed something. The forward, rewind, and stop buttons are working now. What is this malarkey? What did these people take us for? Children? This has to be the most asinine case I've ever taken. What a waste of time. You still think Carter killed him after all of that? Of course. This is a ruse, a setup. I was around back when the radio made the entire country believe aliens were invading. It's all smoke and mirrors, kid. That Warren fella was always a nut. Man studied that occult mumbo-jumbo, He's probably been using one of those Ouija boards or whatever, had his underlings not killed him. But, sir, that man didn't break in the interrogation. Yeah, it just doesn't add up. Why would they go through so much trouble just to fool everyone? I mean, Warren is missing. You have the shrinks and those psycho low whatevers, and to try to understand the insane. Our job is to keep the streets safe. Stay in your lane, boy, or else you won't make it far in our field. Now make yourself useful and store these tapes in the evidence locker. Yeah, but what about Mr. Carter? He's already been transferred. That boy's looking at spending the rest of his life inside a cell. I wouldn't have vouched for the chair. This country is growing softer by the day. But we have no conclusive evidence. Isn't it our job to seek the truth and nothing but the truth? Good God, kid. You're starting to sound like my attorney. The case is closed. The tapes are proof enough, and both of these maniacs won't be fooling anyone anymore. Now go put those tapes this instant. That's an order. Yes, sir. I entered the evidence locker with anything but satisfaction. Blaming Warren's disappearance on a madman's whim was too easy, and it didn't feel right at all. How could nothing have been found? No footprints, no body, or anything was reported. At least as far as Detective Moore was concerned. I must search the area. There must be something useful here. I opened the locker and found a folder alongside some other items. People of my rank were forbidden from snooping around the evidence locker, but my slacker of a boss had probably gone home by now. And reviewing the case files wouldn't tamper with the evidence either. I should look around to find more items. I picked up the book. Its leathery cover nearly tore when I flipped it open. The book must have been old as dirt. Inside the tome were a bunch of scribbles. They appeared to have been some form of language. The characters were so chaotic. Some were tiny and others took up a quarter of a page. It was giving me a headache. I skimmed through the pages and found nothing, but more obtuse scriptures. The Bible's vagueness was nothing compared to this. Was this really written by a human? I closed the book and placed it back inside. It was worthless. We could call in a translator if a person could comprehend that nonsense even existed. I wasn't going to convince my boss to pay for one. I should rely on the tapes and anything I come across from my testimony. Deciphering that book can come later. You should look around to find more items. A lantern in the evidence locker? Strange. I understood that they want all the evidence they could get, but what could they have found with this? I guess Randolph couldn't have clubbed Harry over the head with it, but there wasn't any dents on it. All I saw him doing with it was helping him navigate the cypress at night. No worries, I needed to grab one of them anyways. The sun was beginning to set and I was bound to be out there for a while. I just hoped it had enough oil to last me. We should look around to find more items. The front of the folder read, "The disappearance of Harley Warren." I opened it, found papers listing notes taken by my boss and his colleagues. Let's see what they came up with. Harley Warren, age 33. A man who made his living through his activities surrounding the occult. For a time he worked as a university professor, and don't know who'd hire that quack, but I suppose you need the professor for anything nowadays. On October 30th, his understudy, Randolph Carter, aged 26, arrived at the police station covered in muck and too stricken to speak. He claimed that Harley had been ensnared by a monstrosity too dreadful to describe. Randolph claimed that the incident took place somewhere in the cypress swamp. The only clue he provided was the mention of a particular tombstone. Deputies were sent but were unable to find the tombstone in question. Randolph was promptly taken into custody. Interrogation did not break the man's story. He never mentioned a lawyer nor faltered after hours of interviewing. Just about every technique was administered, short of coercion and physical contact, of course. When mine returned to the first tape my boss and I reviewed, Detective Moore believed he was a compulsive fibber, but even the best of liars falters somewhere. And Randolph's story, despite being founded in fantasy, was flawless. Well, would you look at that? 2 more tapes. My boss didn't mention these, though I suppose he had already reviewed them. He and the others were heading out. I didn't see why I couldn't play one while I was investigating. Okay, I believed I had a plan, but I must finish listening to the tapes I found before moving further.
As I have said before, the weird studies of Harley Warren were well known to me, and to some extent shared by me. Of his vast collection of strange, rare books on forbidden subjects, I have read all that are written in languages of which I am master, but these are few as compared with those in languages I cannot understand. I've never seen scriptures like it. And the fiend-inspired book which brought on the end, the book which he carried in his pocket out of the world, was written in characters whose likes I never saw elsewhere. Warren would never tell me just what was in that book.
A fiendish book. I'm guessing this is why Detective Moore passed this off as nonsense. I believe I understand why the professor lost his position. It's one thing to pursue these topics as a hobby, and another to become obsessed with it. Strange that he kept the book a secret from Randolph. Surely the boy was susceptible to his mentor's ravings.
As I have said before, the weird studies of Harley Warren were well known to me, and to some extent shared by me. Of his vast collection of strange, rare books on forbidden subjects, I have read all that are written in languages of which I am master. I repeat to you, gentlemen, that your inquisition is fruitless. Detain me here forever if you will, confine or execute me if you must have a victim to appropriate the illusion you call justice. But I can say no more than I have said already. Everything that I can remember I have told with perfect candor. Nothing has been distorted or concealed, and if anything remains vague, it is only because of the dark cloud which has come over my mind. That cloud and the nebulous natures of the horrors which brought it upon me. Again I say, I do not know what has become of Harley Warren. Though I think, almost hope, that he is in peaceful oblivion, if there be anywhere so blessed a thing.
The man is well spoken, but it took more than a silver tongue to prove one's innocence. The only conclusive evidence we found were the cassette tapes the student was carrying. These tapes were handed off to Detective Michael Moore for review. However, without a body or the tombstone being found, the evidence provided thus far points to Randolph Carter as responsible for Harley Warren's untimely disappearance. Wait a minute, the tombstone was never found? The cypress swamp is massive. They could have easily missed it, and Detective Moore was most certainly not willing to take the hike. The sloth is so eager to take credit, but if I could find something that the deputies overlooked, I'll not only see Mr. Carter released, but myself promoted. Even if his testimony is fictitious, it might be hinting at something much more sinister. Perhaps we have another serial killer hiding out in the swamp.
As to the nature of our studies, must I say again that I no longer retain full comprehension? It seems to me rather merciful that I do not, for they were terrible studies, which I pursued more through reluctant fascination than through actual inclination. Warren always dominated me, and sometimes I feared him. I remember how I shuddered at his facial expressions on the night before the awful happening, where he talked so incessantly of his theory why certain corpses never decay, but the rest firm fat in their tombs for 1,000 years. But I do not fear him now, for I suspect that he has known horrors beyond my ken. Now I fear for him.
Okay, I believed I had a plan. It was to investigate the cypress swamp to further evidence. I would use the tapes to help me guide on where I need to go. So far, there was no mention of this tombstone Randolph spoke about, though if they were doing their studies out in the swamp, they had to have nested somewhere. But Harley was a wild one. He would be crazy enough to trek that far every day to pursue his studies. I just hope that all of this effort wasn't for nothing. On my way out, I grabbed the cassette player and the tapes and the lantern. I was going to be out there for a long time, and it was getting dark. While tampering with the evidence was illegal, I shouldn't have any problems if I returned to the station after my venture. And with this case being closed, there was no reason for anyone to check the locker, though if someone did, well... No, I was right. One man missing and another got blamed unfairly for his disappearance. Besides, taking risks was part of being a cop. I shouldn't be in any danger, not with my firearm in my holster. Well, as long as I don't encounter any gators. It was running at 7 p.m. by the time I made it to the murky cypress. The smell of mud burned my nose. A choir of crickets, frogs sang, and I found myself needing to constantly swat at mosquitoes. It was miserable. Beyond those inconveniences, there wasn't much out here. The place was void of anything not expected in the swamp. The worst part was that the cypress was enormous. The swamp was over 700,000 acres wide. I could be out here for hours and not even have a third of the bog mapped out. Perhaps going at this alone wasn't the smartest idea. Oh well. I'm here now, may as well that other tape while I search. Ugh! I stubbed my toe and face planted into the muck. The damn rock was hiding in the moss. Ugh. Damn it. I knew I should have brought a change of clothes. That was filthy. Why the hell would the professor conduct research out here of all places? Wait, was I seeing things, or was that some sort of cavern off in the distance? I rubbed my eyes and the image didn't vanish. Looks like I still had my wits about me. I crawled to my feet and trudged over, being sure not to trip over another rock on my way there. The building came into view and it was just as revolting as the cypress. The wood was damp and decaying, the windows were stained if not broken, and the structure itself looked like it could collapse at any moment. Lord knows how long this thing had been out here. Who in their right mind would take this pigsty their home? A madman, that's who. I must search the area. The door nearly fell off when I opened it. Had it not been for my lantern, it would have been impossible to see anything in this shithole. I should look around to find more clues. I pulled open a drawer and my heart dropped. Another tape, just like the ones we were listening to while resting inside. I always thought more was phony, and now I had proof. This could turn the entire case on its head. I should look around to find more clues. I picked up the portrait. The musky glass depicted Warren speaking with his pupils. They appeared to be mesmerized by whatever he was saying. I guess you need to be charismatic if you're going to be teaching something I guess you need to be charismatic if you're going to be teaching something so fictitious. I think that youth in the front was Randolph. He had the same brown hair and... Wait, there's two photos inside the portrait. What's this? I pulled out both parchments, finding the photo and the white sheet. The numbers on the sheet were 4, 5, 6, and 7. How original. I inputted the code, but the safe didn't click. So the numbers weren't in any particular order, or perhaps they were not correct. Regardless, there were 28 different patterns this combination could take. I should look around to find more clues. It needed a 4-digit code. Damn. Carters had likely been shipped off by now, and I doubt they would have let some cop talk to him.
Once more I say that I have no clear idea of our object on that night. Certainly, it had much to do with something in the book which Warren carried with him. That ancient book and indecipherable characters which had come to him from India a month before, but I swear I do not know what it was that we expected to find. Your witness says he saw us at 11:30 on the pike headed for Big Cypress Swamp. This is probably true, but I have no distinct memory of it. The picture seared into my soul is of one scene only, and the hour must have been long after midnight, for a waning crescent moon was high in the vaporous heavens.
The numbers on the sheet were 4, 5, 6, 7. I inputted the numbers, but the safe didn't click, so the numbers weren't in any particular order. Or perhaps they were not correct. Regardless, there were 28 different patterns this combination could take. I should look around to find more clues. I eagerly plucked the parchment and began reading, only to be disappointed by the self-absorbed writing that met my eyes. This discovery is momentous. Finally, finally my colleagues will take me seriously. They all called me mad. They all called me a fool. Some even called me a witch. But they'll eat their words when they see what I've discovered. But I mustn't drop all of my findings so soon. There should be a build-up first. Perhaps a monthly update will suffice. It'll be a fun experiment nonetheless. My first paper shall be sent on the 7th of November. My second will be sent on the 4th of December. And I will release my third on New Year's. But I think the 5th will do, and so on and so forth. I just hope my Randolph knows how to read between the lines. Read between the lines. Oh, this must be for some sort of code for something. My boss was an idiot. Warren left everything they needed to find on this desk, and yet Carter was still arrested? How is this that rookie cop? How is that a rookie cop knew to look harder than the detective? I needed a 4-digit code. I opened the book, and thank God, the script was readable. I had figured out that the professor's scribblings would be as frantic as his beliefs, and these entries look like they've been written fairly recently. The excerpts take place over a span of 4 weeks. I was hoping for a memoir's worth of writings, but I'll take what I can get. I had not considered documenting my experiments over the years. I've had nothing to note but fruitless research until recently. After days and days of exploration and investigation that led to nothing, I had finally found a clue that proved the legends were real. Upon approaching a particular graveyard in the center of the swamp, I heard whispers. Not the whispers of one man to another, but they were alien. Words cannot describe how foreign these voices were, but I'll try nonetheless. They felt like they were being implanted into my mind, like thoughts that were not my own. They were mystical, deep, and inaudible. They sounded like the babblings of someone in an asylum. It was unnerving. At first I thought I was going insane, that my days with little to no sleep had finally caught up to me. But every visit I made yielded the same whispering. I shall inform my understudied Randolph of this peculiarity. Another perspective will invaluable to understanding the phenomenon. Week 2. The ramblings in my head were not hallucinations. Randolph heard them as well. The poor lad wasn't happy. He demanded that we'd flee, that we would never be able to convince the laypersons of such a tale, though truthfully, he wanted nothing more to do with this research. I, of course, allowed him to abandon the assignment. I may be a tad loony, but I am not heartless. However, the boy remained stalwart, likely to his detriment. As of writing this entry, we've no idea where they were coming from. As much as I loathed it, I believe some excavation will be in order. We'll bring some shovels and begin digging post haste. I hope my pupil can keep his bearings long enough. Week 3. My God, this last week was abysmal. I am a scholar. Such physical labor was not what I signed up for, but I know we're getting close. We found a lot of abnormalities in the muck, from body parts to tombstones as old as the dirt itself, and so on. If anything else had seen what we've tossed aside, they might have lost their minds. Poor Randolph had to leave early on many occasions, especially when we uncovered that disembodied arm. And because the further we dig, the louder the whispers became. They were beginning to become overbearing. I found myself babbling like an idiot from time to time. But I must persevere. Perhaps there's no monster in this wretched swamp, but these alien horrors mustn't go unnoticed either. Perhaps our invaders were coming from below rather than space. This research could be groundbreaking. Maybe this could hint back to some revelation to the past. The Dead Sea Scrolls were momentous for understanding the Bible. Week 4. We found it. The source of the whispers. Randolph and I uncovered it. It took weeks of digging, but upon discovering a peculiar tombstone, these voices became overwhelming. God knows what lies beneath the stone. And now that I thought about it, similar voices caused the prophets to frenzy from time to time. I could feel it. My mind and grip on reality were starting to wane. But so be it. This only proves my studies weren't fiction. It solidified them. Finally, I could redeem my name and return to my position as professor. No more lectures in that outhouse for me. No. I'll only tutor from the finest facilities from here on. And Randolph, my dear Randolph, I will be at my side as master and pupil. We will change the world. Stay tuned, curious reader. The next entry will blow your mind. I searched the rest of the book to be certain, but there were no further entries. Cold sweat trickled down my spine. I was ready to find bodies, bugs, and maybe even a gator, but not what Harley was raving about. It's starting to sound like he had a heart attack. Our brains are capable of making us believe that the craziest of stories. Poor Randolph likely got roped into this madness. This doesn't justify him not calling 911, but it'll at least absolve him of being charged as a murderer. Maybe a trip to the shrink, but not a prison. I had my destination, and with all of the digging they did, finding the graveyard shouldn't take too long to find. Unfortunately for poor Harley, I had no interest in pursuing his studies. Once I find his corpse, I'm heading home. Perfect. I needed these batteries. I knew it. Another tape added to the collection. I need to listen to the tapes I found before moving forward.
I'm sorry to have to ask you to stay on the surface, but it would be a crime to let anyone with your frail nerves go down there. You can't imagine, even from what you have read and from what I've told you, the things I shall have to see and do. It's fiendish work, Carter, And I doubt if any man without ironclad sensibilities could ever see it through and come up alive and sane. I don't wish to offend you. Heaven knows I'd be glad enough to have you with me, but the responsibility is in a certain sense mine, and I couldn't drag a bundle of nerves like you down to probable death or madness. I tell you, you can't imagine what the thing is really like, but I promise to keep you informed over the telephone of every move. You see, I've enough wire here to reach the center of the Earth and back.
Hey, that wasn't too long. It was good to see that Harley showed some compassion towards his pupil, even if he was a bit extreme. Mention of the fiendish work, however, did not ease my worries. It was fabricated. It had to be. But hearing two men speak on the same insanity made me regret even considering going to that infernal graveyard. Maybe I should abort. I had evidence on me to persuade my boss to call for another investigation. No, I had no authority. At best, he'd brush me aside, and at worst, he'd fire me and take credit for what I discovered. I wouldn't put it past that snake. I had a job to do. I just hoped this called for a cop's expertise and not an exorcist. It was getting late. All I needed was to find Harley's body and nothing more. I didn't want to risk getting spooked either. Harley was a maniac. God knows that tale he and his apprentice have conjured regarding that tombstone. I can't get psyched out. I need to stay focused and finish the task at hand.
Place was an ancient cemetery. So ancient that I trembled at the manifold signs of immemorial years. It was in a deep, damp hollow, overgrown with rank grass, moss, and curious creeping weeds, and filled with a vague stench which my idle fancy associated absurdly with rotting stone. On every hand were the signs of neglect and decrepitude, and I seem haunted by the notion that Warren and I were the first living creatures to invade a lethal silence of centuries. Over the valley's rim a wan, waning crescent moon peered through the noisome vapors that seemed to emanate from unheard of catacombs, and by its feeble, wavering beams I could distinguish a repellent array of antique slabs, urns, cenotaphs, and mausoleum facades, all crumbling, moss-grown and moisture-stained, and partly concealed by the gross luxuriance of unhealthy vegetation. My first vivid impression of my own presence in this terrible necropolis concerns the act of pausing with Warren before a certain half-obliterated sepulchre, and of throwing down some burdens which we seemed to have been carrying. I now observed that I had with me an electric lantern and 2 spades, whilst my companion was supplied with a similar lantern and a portable telephone outlet. No word was uttered, for the spot and the task seemed known to us, and without delay we seized our spades and commenced to clear away the grass, weeds, and drifted earth from the flat, archaic mortuary. After uncovering the entire surface, which consisted of 3 immense granite slabs, we stepped back to some distance to survey the charnel scene, and Warren appeared to make some mental calculations. Then he returned to the sepulchre and, using his spade as a lever, sought to pry up the slab nearest to a stony ruin, which may have been a monument in its day. He did not succeed, and motioned me to come to his assistance. Finally, our combined strength loosened the stone, which we raised and tipped to one side.
Jeez, I wanted information on the cemetery, but I wasn't ready for a documentary. I must carry on. By replaying the tape as I walked, I was able to find the burial site in no time, though something was off. When I first arrived, the place was bustling with wildlife. Now, all that accompanied me was a dreary silence. There were no crickets or toads out, and not one mosquito had bitten me since I had left the cabin. Had it always been so quiet here? I figured these voices drowned out everything else for Randolph and Carter. Could it be that this silence drove them mad? Our mind tended to play tricks on us when it tried to understand something it could not. Meanwhile, the graveyard looked as if pirates had plundered it. Unearthed mud littered the terrain, chunks of rock were scattered about, and despite the mention of missing limbs, I did not smell nor see any. At least, the good professor had the sense to dispose of them. I had to rely on my lantern to see much of anything. At a glance, the land just looked like a bunch of muck. But upon closer inspection, I spotted a tombstone that was recently ripped from from its resting place. The hole beneath it had to be Harley's doing. I tried to read the epitaph, but it was written in those scribbles, just like from the book. I shuddered. That book was from India. Why are those writings in the cypress? Was this some sort of joke? I dropped my lantern and leapt backwards. The voice. What the hell was that? Police! Show yourself! I scanned the area with my lantern, yet was met with the same silence as before. It was crazy. I had my firearm on me, but I couldn't stop shivering. That voice. It sounded like the whispers straight from Harley's journal. No. I was just hearing things. This must have been getting to me, though. I thought I was bolder than this. With deep breaths, I retrieved my belongings and peered down inside. This was no ordinary grave. There were stairs and what appeared to be a wire trailing down them. It looked like a telephone cable, much like the one discussed in one of the tapes. His body had to be down here somewhere. I was able to walk inside the tomb without issue. Was it custom to make such elaborate tombs in India? I knew Egypt had one of those customs for a while. The walls were riddled with that alien scripture, giving me the chills. I tried not to focus on them too much. These voices I kept hearing were bad enough. That said, I couldn't help but be fascinated by all of this. This culture had to be thousands of years old, and for it to make it all the way out here? How? I guess I could now sympathize with Harley's obsession. This site warranted further study with or without the purpose of finding his body. And as I reached the end, there was no trace of Harley in sight. Was Randolph really crazy enough to do the occultist? Was Randolph really crazy enough to do the occultist in? The boy was rattled by his time in the Cypress. Would that have driven him to commit murder? I didn't know, and even with the evidence I gathered, it would not be enough to persuade a jury either. Though there were some other items to consider. There was a telephone and those spaded shovels, and speak of the devil, another tape. I should look around to find these items. The tip of the spade was fresh with dirt. This proved the digging was disproved the digging that was mentioned from the tapes. Sadly, there was no dint on the shovel. I could see Randolph snapping and smacking him upside the head. Could he have buried himself below it? As an act of a maniacal worship to whatever culture this was? Well, I was too tired to test that theory. I could use this to justify another investigation, but that's about it. The telephone appeared to be intact. I could get it tested for fingerprints, but that's all it was good for. It was strange to see all of these items undamaged like this. If Randolph did Harley in, it wouldn't he be wise enough to dump all of this in the bag? It just doesn't add up. His testimony, the tapes, the clues I found, they're suggesting something, but it isn't murder. Or at least in the traditional sense. So my wild goose chase has come to an end. The last tape, or at least I hoped so. With the batteries I have, I could listen to it on my walk back. It'll help fend off these whispers. If I stayed down here much longer, I'd wind up like Harley. I'll pop in the final tape later. Let's put this story to bed once and for all.
But if you could see what I am seeing. Carter, it's terrible. Monstrous. Unbelievable.
Warren! What is it? What is it?
I can't tell you, Carter. It's too utterly beyond thought. I do not tell you. No man could know it and live. Great God, I never dreamed of this. Carter, for the love of God, put back the slab and get out of this if you can. Quick! Leave everything else and make for the outside. It's your only chance. Do as I say, and don't ask me to explain. Beat it. For God's sake, put back the slab and beat it, Carter.
Warren, brace up! I'm coming down!
Don't! You can't understand. It's too late, and my own fault. Put back the slab and run. There's nothing else you or anyone can do now. Quick, before it's too late. Carter, hurry. It's no use. You must go. Better one than two. The slab. Nearly over now. Don't make it harder. Cover up those damn steps and run for your life. You're losing time. So long, Carter. Won't see you again. Curse these hellish things. Legions! My God! Beat it! Beat it! Beat it!
Warren! Warren! Answer me, are you there?
Must leave this place. I ascended from the hole and pushed the tombstone back into its original spot. I didn't want anyone else to get entangled in this lunacy, not unless they were a detective. The only reason I didn't try to cover up the epigraph was because I wanted to be able to lead the investigators there. This site was dangerous. I didn't know what it was, but the public needed to be kept safe from it. Thank God I was on my way out of this hellhole. Being out here, in the dead of silence, in the pitch black swamp, and the murmurs in my ear, it was maddening. I placed a hand on my firearm and tried to control my breathing. This was all just one big convenience. Yes, just a big misunderstanding. There was no such thing as... Fuck this shit, I'm out of here. I bolted. I didn't give a rat's ass about Randolph or this stupid case. I wanted out of here. Sweat ran down my brow as I pressed on through the bog, running from no one I could see. With each step I took, the whispers grew louder and louder. It was as if I was being hunted despite no one being in sight. I looked down in the cassette, and the tapes were still playing. Did that come from the... Leave me alone, you son of a... My toes rammed into a stone and I collapsed. I scrambled to my feet, only to be stuck motionless by a pair of eyes looking my way. All I could see was a shadow behind them, a shadow growing closer the second. My hand rushed for my holster and drew my firearm. Without hesitation, I fired. Ah! I unloaded the entire magazine, but to no avail. This silhouette had all but consumed my sight. Horrified, I tried to crawl away. I didn't make it far, not before... Thank you for playing. The Statement of Randolph Carter.